Well, first of all, thank you very much, Juliette, for the introduction to the theories, and thank you also to the other organizers. Let me just say one thing before starting, that it's always extremely tricky to speak for an audience as wide and with all the interesting things that we're all doing in your own fields. But as I was talking with Brian Fair on the way from the hotel to here, she's an art historian who will speak later in this meeting. The reflection that somehow arises after several times you try to do this difficult exercise invites questioning on your own field that doesn't really happen in the same way when you speak to your close colleagues. So I try to get there. So let's plunge into infinity between emergence and definition. Since this is the first lecture, I was in a way thinking about the problem of defining infinity, and the first part of the lecture will be about how infinity, in many ways, is in many ways is impossible to define. We'll see in which ways it is impossible to define. That's the first series of topics that we will reflect about. So instead of defining, we'll try to auscultate, we'll try to take the pulse of infinity, as it were. I will begin not by speaking about mathematics, although mathematicians will recognize for sure many of the topics that are here, but topics that come from somewhere else. There will be an interlude, they call it perspective, interlude on viewpoints. I will speak about Poincaré. Well, we're here at the Henri Poincaré. I think it is fitting to see what he had to say and what kind of responses can we give. And then about Florensky, somebody who offers us a kind of bridge between the Poincaré world and what I will be defining in the first part. The last part will go back to the original issue of definitions, but there we'll get a little bit closer to what happens in current set theory and model theory. So the first part won't have that much mathematics. We'll then go to Poincaré, essentially quoting and trying to reflect on what he had to say. Some art historian, Florensky, so we'll be listening to some of what he has to say about generalized perspective, and then back to the original question, but in mathematics. Since we're here, I will start by quoting Proust. I will go quickly over the original French, just I think it fits, and then I say what he's saying. Car ce que nous croyons, notre amour, notre jalousie, n'est pas une même passion continue, indivisible. Elle se compose d'une infinité d'amours successifs, de jalousies différentes et qui sont éphémères, mais par leur multitude ininterrompue, donne l'impression de la continuité, l'illusion de l'unité. La vie de l'amour de Swann, la fidélité de sa jalousie, était faite de la mort, de l'infidélité, d'innombrables désirs, d'innombrables doutes. For what we believe is our love, our jealousy, is not the same passion, continuous, indivisible. It is composed of an infinity of successive loves, of different jealousies, and which are ephemeral, but which by their uninterrupted multitude give the impression of continuity, the illusion of unity. The life of Swann's love, the fidelity of his jealousy, were made of death, of infidelity, of innumerable desires, of innumerable doubts. Thus, Proust describes Mr. Swann's wanderings of lust, jealousy, sense of loss in his calèche or on foot along Boulevard Saint-Germain and many other places in Paris a century ago. The uncontainable wave of lust, of jealousy, and reciprocated love, this uncontainability and impossibility to control seems to be the first feature of infinity. As is its eruption into the life of humankind, just as out of control as Proust's description of love and jealousy in Swann here a century ago. In A Amour de Swann, Proust has Swann, Mr. Swann, switch from being an intellectual in control of his life to wander at night along the boulevard, making foolish decisions, rendering himself vulnerable to Odette's whims in a seemingly crazed and unfazed way. I have to say, infinity has a similar way of erupting into our lives, both historically, as we will see, and at the individual level. Impossible to stop, to control. So, in a way, I wanted to bring this passage from Proust to show how infinity erupts. It just arrives in a way that completely phases out anything that you were trying to control originally, and the way it erupts into our lives has this sort of pushing its way out in spite of us. Now, let's try to think about the problem of defining infinity. Is it an essential contradiction? So in opening this symposium, a first natural but naive task would be to offer a definition of infinity. The issue of defining infinity involves an immediate contradiction in terms, present immediately at the level of the two words definition and infinity. So finis, the common word in definition, and the infinity, finis in Latin, has these translations: borders, and hence territory, land, country, enclosed within boundaries. Also a limit, an end, a purpose, an aim, an object. And the issue of defining infinity involves then an immediate contradiction in terms, present immediately at the level of the two words definition and infinity. Both terms, in Latin and English and French and so on, share the root finis, boundary, border. One of them includes a negation, infinite, and the other one stresses or accentuates the border, the edge, defining. So I start in a different way. Rather than offering a definition of infinity, in this lecture I want to examine infinity, to auscultate the notion, to try different variations on its emergence in a diachronic way, in mathematics, in set theory and null theory, and in the theory of perspective. In other words, we wish to allow infinity to present itself as it has done so far, and as it continues doing in contemporary mathematics. My first point will be that the question of infinity has been with us as human beings since the very beginnings of mathematics, of philosophy, and of aesthetic considerations, at least since the Presocratics took the bold step of stopping taking the world for granted, and started to watch the world, the universe, as an object of study. When they do that, you start plunging into infinity. Let me quote the Czech philosopher Patočka on this. I think this quote is very precise on this. The Greeks were not only the first to discover the format of systematic deductive inquiry, they were also the first who did not take the world for granted. They are the first who ask explicitly about the whole that embraces all, ourselves included, and therewith confront the simple wonder of all wonders, that all of this is, and that the being of that totality is not something obvious like the particulars of life. Our relating to this wonder can be compared only to those relations in which we pass from an accustomed stance into a different mode of life, to the transition from a dream to the discovery that all had been otherwise, to suspicions suddenly aroused by something we had long passed unconcerned. It is a strangeness, a wonder, an awe. It is tawa zain, from which, according to Plato, wisdom is born. We have here Rodin's sculptures here at the Museum of Rodin, as we took this past weekend. So that's from Patočka's introduction to Husserl's phenomenology. And then we will embark on a variation of infinity and representation, and finally on the way infinity ends up creating in contemporary logic its own definitions. So in a way, infinity pushes out its own internal logic. You do not define it too much in advance. Okay, let me also start by a very difficult question, very classical question: who are you? There was when lives were at stake, there was a first answer in Exodus 3:14 to Moses. Yeh Asher Yeh. Sum qui sum, I am who I am. That's the answer to the question, who are you? It's a very primal self-reference. I am who I am. I cannot be defined, named as you would name your brother Aaron or the Nile River. You cannot define it in the same way. It's a very different kind of answer. Additionally, the phrase in Hebrew has an imperfect, unfolding quality. Yeh Asher Yeh. I am being, whoever I am being, is perhaps a better translation. I'm not, there are people here who would have something to say about that, but somehow there is some unfolding in that answer. So this extreme self-reference in the answer, this unfolding and reflecting quality, is the first of two aspects of infinity I want to describe. Reflection is at the very heart of current working mathematics of the infinity, as very likely will be explored in different ways during this symposium by several people here, and as we will describe at the end of the lecture today. Reflection, self-reflection, or reflection in general, is an important feature, this sort of self-reflecting quality of infinity. So this, as I was saying, reflection is at the very heart of current working mathematics. And we'll go back to that. Now, there is another answer to exactly the same question, and it's also very famous, just as famous as the one I quoted a moment ago. I quote here Daniel Keller-Rosen at the beginning of his book, No One's Ways, an essay on infinity naming. You'll recognize where it comes from in a moment. He vanquished a brute who killed his guests and ate them raw. To him the voyager spoke these famous lines: Utis is my name. My father and mother call me Utis, as do all the others who are my companions. The giant fast drank, fell asleep soon after uttering his promise or his threat. Then the men, united in a common cause, gouged out their captor's eye with a burning stake. So you know it's from Odyssey. The once indomitable host cried out for help. His neighbors, alarmed, asked who. Utis, in the sea god's mouth, becomes Utis. No one. That was the trick to save his life. So in the two cases, in the who are you in Exodus and here, there are lives at stake, and this emergence of this question, who are you, is connected to saving life. And I say infinity has this sort of urgent way to arrive. It is about saving ourselves from something in some way. So here it's not so much about self-reference. There can be also some self-reference here, but negation, utis, no one, I am no one, the non-human, the non-bounded, the non-restricted, different sort of infinity. So Odysseus saves his life by turning no one into negation of specification, by opening up the game into confusion and indefiniteness and a certain chaos that enables him to save his life. So my main point in this lecture is that we may read the history of many aspects of infinity, the story of its emergence, inception, and later its many developments in mathematics, philosophy, and art as an unfolding of those two different answers to the same question: reflection, self-reference, and negation of specification. Mathematical logic has, in the past 125 years, been able to gather momentum from these answers. Okay. Sorry, yes, this is just said. Let's look at this basic diagram of reflection, extremely basic diagram of reflection. So, technically it corresponds to the first attempt of definition of infinity, namely having some set A with some proper subset B, so there is a point in the difference. Such that there is some bijective function from A to B, some correspondence that maps different elements to different elements, assigns one element to each element of A, and leaves no element in B without being a match. The image f of A, must be inside B. Its image must also be there and must be a different point, because there can be no repetition of points, according to what I just said. So iterating this process, a chain of points is automatically created, all starting from a single point A in the difference between the two sets. start from a single point in that difference, and you get automatically a chain by that perfect matching or perfect reflection in this case. Now, this process, and this may also happen outside of A, of course. Now, this process may be taken as a definition of infinity is on the one hand taken as a given by most mathematicians, but points at the early difficulties with the concept. Aristotle's take would be that the process itself cannot be grasped, it is potential, but not actual. However, since the late 19th century, mathematics has not only taken this as a first possible way to step to infinity, but together with other axioms of set theory, it has built a theory of not only one, but many different infinities. Cantor started this path by proving almost 150 years ago that the infinity of a line you draw must be strictly larger than the first infinity of counting. In mathematical lingo, the cardinality of the natural numbers, we call it Aleph 0, is strictly smaller than the power, the 2 to the Aleph 0, which is the cardinality of the real numbers. Now, this realization opened many serious questions on the structure of infinity. How dense is it? How filled? How complete? What about the continuum? Yes, but in a way, continuum is not linked to infinity, but not reduced to it. It's something additional that I don't want to touch just now. Now, another line opened by Cantor's proof is that there is more than one infinity. Well, how many? This led to one of the most intriguing constructions and studies of infinity during the 20th century, and continuing very actively now. Actually, some of the main players are in this room. The large cardinal hierarchy. How many infinities? It looks, well, there is here a possible diagram of large cardinals. You see, they form some sort of hierarchy where the larger infinities are above the smaller infinities. So we're now very quickly into a world we jumped from that original point of Cantor and they framed it in the right axiomatic framework to this sort of kind of a cathedral-like construction, just like cathedral, like the cathedral here. The large cardinal hierarchy is both an intrinsic study of infinity, as defined by many properties, and very important of these being reflection. Now, arguably, the deepest knowledge of the inner workings of infinity has been gathered by the study of large cardinals and their interaction with possible mathematical universes. Yet, in some sense, this actualization of infinity becomes not only actual, but you can compare many different infinities as we do all the time when we study large cardinals, with all the brutal richness of its inner workings, or in spite of it. And the inner workings are ways of controlling instances of reflection and many other properties like those I've been naming here, and calibrating them and controlling them. Well, it might well suffer from the original criticism by Aristotle. Occasionally, a larger than infinite infinity is studied. Maybe there is some kind of infinity beyond all this long list of infinities. Now, the class of all infinities plays this role at times, or what set theorists call the inverse V of set theory. So there's some kind of fuzziness in this cathedral that might be called into question if you look at some of the original questioning on infinity. It's extremely powerful, it's extremely beautiful. We will see a lot of symmetries of infinity. I am sure later today, having here like Menachem Aguilar, Jean Valeria, John Steele, and many other people who were working on the intricacies of infinity and the connection to universes of set theory. Let's now go to the interlude, the perspective, and shifting viewpoints on this. And since we're here, I think it is fitting to listen a little bit to Poincaré. I think in this case I'll just leave in the original, you can read it, and I'll just read it in English. So since a long time ago, the notion of infinity had been introduced in mathematics. But this infinity was what philosophers used to call becoming, devenir. The mathematical infinite was but quantity susceptible to grow beyond all limit. It was a quantity that was variable, but of which one could not say that it had surpassed all the limits, but just that it would surpass them. Elle dépasserait. It would surpass. So it's all in this sort of a conditional way. Cantor started to introducing, or he took the task, Cantor took the task of introducing mathematics an actual infinity, as I described a moment ago. That is a quantity that is not just susceptible to surpass all limits, but which is regarded as having surpassed them already. This is in Henri Poincaré's Mathematics and Logic. It's an essay he wrote, and then he continues his complaint or rant against Cantor, his influence, and the role of Hilbert. Such as the Hydra of Lerna, with its famous heads that would grow again all the time. Well, Hercules had it easy, because his Hydra only had 9 heads. But here, there are too many of them. As you see, you're gonna talk. So Poincaré's criticism is not restrained to mathematics, but to encompasses one of the great philosophical debates, Leibniz versus Kant. He says on this, for Couturat, was a contemporary of Poincaré, these works have definitely tranché le débat, would be settled the question, the very old debate between Leibniz and Kant. These works, I mean Cantor's works, have shown that there is no synthetic a priori judgment, that intuition doesn't play any role. We see very well that it is the centennial of the death of Kant. That's his way of treating these things. Now, the set theoretical approach to infinity would then be, perhaps, according to Poincaré, on the wrong side of phenomenology. Well, perhaps. But I think Poincaré is a hasty reading. He himself set up a mathematical basis for other aspects of infinity, without saying it, that only decades later will be mixed with Cantor's work. A short technical note: algebraic topology, the offspring of Poincaré's work, has been recently shown by Bagadia and others to be intimately connected with very large cardinals in that large cardinal hierarchy, with Cantorian infinities having extremely strong reflection properties. So, in a way, Poincaré's reaction was perhaps natural, perhaps he was unsettled by what's happening, but in many ways he himself was dealing, as I tried to illustrate, this is from the Kiefer exhibition now in the Rodin. He was creating systems of what are called liftings and covers in mathematics, whereby you analyze not quite infinities, but rather paths, and lift the paths along systems that go up and down, and try to get at some simplicity. Of course, the technical words that right from there are algebraic topology. He opened another kind of infinity, very different kind of infinity, that seemed perhaps in the beginning very different from Cantor's. But it is not that far away. Of course, finding those connections has taken some time and is recent work. And it has gone through many things that did not exist in Poincaré's time. Now, part of the interlude, let's go to this Ferenczi, a generalized perspective. So Ferenczi, he was an art theorist who had studied mathematics in Moscow in the 1910s, 100 years ago. In 1917, I think he was a student of mathematics in Moscow. And he later became a religious mystic in the Soviet Union. So he was kind of unusual and interesting person in many ways. So Pavel Ferenczi enters the discussion of infinity in a way that may be, perhaps for us, bridging the two positions. So Cantor and representation are dealt with by Ferenczi in a way that may allow us to bridge Poincaré's extreme criticism with our set theoretical way of dealing with infinity. Now I have here an icon, because in his inverted perspective, that's a very important essay. Ferenczi starts with the analysis of the seemingly wrong perspective of Russian icons, And very quickly he describes how one may understand it as a perspective with an inverted projection. Something that where instead of taking the projection point as usual, you take it in your own eyes, as in the first picture here. Now, the mystic reasons for these are perhaps not central today, but the reason I mentioned Kerensky is that well beyond his original description of the perspective in icons, he opened the way to a completely free way of understanding perspective. And so, after he describes this, he takes a counter and he starts describing all possible maps between the three-dimensional space and a two-dimensional plane or in a one-dimensional line. And then he says, well, that's the very beginning of what enables the possibility of arbitrary perspective. Of course, he acknowledges that in most cases, this arbitrary perspective will entail a loss of form. And then he reflects on the difference between classical perspective, stemming from Greek theater stage, originally it was developed for the theater stage rather than for painting. And he starts saying, well, when you do perspective, what you do is you choose the kind of things that you want to represent, and you do away with all the others. So there are two basic examples. He's comparing the classical example with the Russian icon example, where the way the projection happens is somewhat inverted. But then he says, following Cantor, following also the work by Peano and many bijections and many projections that there are and that were known very well already in his time, one can take an extremely free take on perspective and he speaks about taking arbitrary maps between the three-dimensional space, or representation of the three-dimensional space, onto planes or onto lines, and playing with very different things depending on what you want to represent. That's a very interesting take for a Russian mystic who had studied mathematics. So his theory is a theory of free perspective. It's really written in the form of an art history essay. He goes to many descriptions of Roman murals in Pompeii. He goes to, of course, descriptions of Anaxagoras on perspective, and then later on in the Renaissance. And then he really switches from the voice of the art historian to the voice of the mathematician and of the, well, philosopher who is concerned about representation. Okay, now to the original question. We go back to the original question and go back to definability. Now we're in the mid-20th century, at least in this slide. Let's go back to that original question of defining infinity. In mathematics, logic is the main theory of definability. So remember, definability was at the very origin kind of the opposite of what you do with infinity. Let me just describe something extremely quickly to say what it is. So usually a logic contains a vocabulary that enables one to build sentences and formulas. And these formulas are ways of framing definitions within a given language. For instance, the set of all pairs x, y that satisfy an equation of the form x squared plus y squared is equal to 1 may be seen as one Cartesian definition of a circle. Now, definability for infinity has this sort of aspect in the Rodin. In the case of infinity, the story is, as you can now expect from our review of early avatars and later debates, more complicated than the definition of a circle that we just saw. Mathematical logic has been able to incorporate infinity as part of a way to define objects. The so-called infinitary logics, L kappa lambda, do precisely this, and also capture some of the avatars of infinity. Set theory is the most refined way and of reflection. So we mentioned briefly two logical constructs of interest, one of them historical, and incorporating the issue of negation. Remember, that was one of the second answer to the difficult question in the Odyssey. And the second, a truly contemporary take on the issue of reflection. Remember, it was negation and reflection. And both of them connected to the way a logic manages to internalize infinity. So I first go to historical logic that is not well known by mathematical logicians, at least I don't think it is. And then the other one is very contemporary. So following the thread of Odysseus' response, Utis, to the question, who are you? Daniel Keller-Rosen revisits the unfolding of infinity along the history of philosophy in his book, No One's Way, that I mentioned before. Among the many steps, I find of particular interest his description of Kant's third way, beyond a priori versus a posteriori. There is a third way in Kant, he describes, in connection with infinite judgments. So it's sort of third way, this is also from Baudin, where something is very well defined and you have the raw rock, somehow. So consider these two sentences. The soul is not mortal, and the soul is non-mortal. Well, at first it seemed like a little playing with words, but Kant took it seriously, and he says, well, I quote here Keller-Rosen, Kant asks the reader to follow him as he passes from the negative quality to the infinite. The soul is non-mortal. As far as logical form is concerned, Kant remarks, I have certainly made an actual affirmation, for I have placed the soul within the unlimited domain of non-mortal things. The non-mortal, so you now are describing a whole category, the non-mortal, is unlimited, unbeschränkt. In other words, despite being engendered by a partition. So Kant's reasoning seems to rely on, and this is really Keller-Rosen's point, an unstated axiom concerning an infinite multitude, one that remains equal to itself, no matter how much is removed from it. Of course, no matter how much small, finite, is removed from it. When you look at the quality of being non-mortal, you have to include all the possible non-mortal things. And non-mortal is, according to Keller-Rosen, and according to Kant, had this undefined, unbeschränkt, unlimited quality that, in a way, might be called an infinite predicate. In the next generation, so right after Kant, Salomon Maimon, he's not very well known, but he was from Polish, Lithuania, Polish Jewish philosopher, Lithuania. Salomon Maimon actually created a whole logic he called zero logic, together with an arithmetic. He tried to devise this sort of arithmetic, and he called it zero logic because he used the properties of zero in an arithmetic, inverting zero that gave the sort of infinity that happens there, that in some sense was able to capture a form infinity, or a form of infinity, starting from Kant's infinite judgments, the non-mortal. This is very early, this is 200 years ago, and it's really classical, but this sort of logic might have reappeared later in many different guises. I just wanted to tell how it appeared in this connection with Kant. So the emergence of logics, beginning with infinity, therefore seems to have predecessors quite different from the latest development, the enormous infinitary logic of the 20th century that will most likely be described later in this meeting. And for our last points, back to reflection, I want to describe then, so we close this trip to infinity by revisiting the original self-reflection assertion, the Eje asher Eje, Sun qui Sun, in the light of quite recent constructions of mathematical logic. But instead of directly studying infinity phenomena as we do in large cartels, won't do that here, one may rather take a class of objects of interest and focus on the ways of reflection they satisfy, on the way your class of objects reflects as a system of reflections into one another, following what the ancients called harmonic reflection. Now, in mathematics, this could be any class of structures. Say, for instance, a class of groups, if you're interested in symmetry, or a class of Boolean algebras, if you're interested in dualities of values, or a class of some interesting mathematical object that you have in mind, or a mathematical theory of perspective, or projective geometry, or whatever. Now you have several different of these objects, and you try to build up a system where you, instead of just looking at one object, you start saying how objects reflect into one another. And we're going to use these objects to test a little bit infinity, to auscultate infinity. So these good reflection systems, the technical name is abstract elementary classes due to Scheller, but I will call them just good reflection systems here, are systems that are where you have all your symmetries. They are endowed with a reasonable notion of reflect well. It is possible to reflect down to smaller structures. There is no limitation to doing cumulative constructions, and reflecting up and down through a larger structure can be reduced to one reflection. All of these things are features that one would like to have in your reflection system. And these are actually, for those of you who are in mathematical logic, this is a translation of the axioms of abstract elementary classes. But really, it's about, we're looking at them as a reflection system that has nice properties. Cumulative up, the previous to last, and it is possible to reflect down to smaller structures, Lowenheim's column properties. Now, these good reflection systems were originally devised or defined by Scheller to not directly to capture infinities or other parts of infinity, as we're doing here, but rather to recast what is normally done in large parts of mathematics when dealing with many different structures, but without assuming axiomatizations. A very short description of the program is try to obtain as many consequences, small theory, as you want, as you need, without relying or over-relying on logic, on definability and axiomatizability, at least not on the front presentation of your class of objects. So you want to study groups, focus on reflection properties, not on definability issues, is somehow the message. So very recently, in 2016, Scheller has announced that there is an internal logic that completely captures these reflection systems. This is very much work in progress, and there are some mathematical complications going on there. So if this is true, there is perhaps a way to define what reflects, what is essentially infinite in this sense, in this general sense. Much earlier, around 1980, Scheller had also proved the following intriguing fact. For an abstract logic, now you take another point of view, where you take an abstract logic, the amalgamation property is equivalent to compactness. Why do I bring this up here? So first of all, we have the fact, 2016, that your reflection systems, abstract elementary classes, have internal logic that completely capture them. This was not known. There were many partial results along those ways, but the fact that there is one logic, and it is a nice logic in many ways, shows that perhaps there are ways of capturing in an internal way the definitions of infinity, but you have to do a lot of work. Now, amalgamation and compactness were proved a long time ago now to be the same or equivalent in the general sense. Amalgamation is this diagram on the left-hand side, where essentially if you have some base n and two branchings, two models, and the reflection between n1 and n, and n2 and n, you can find what is at the red top of this, a kind of blend, an amalgam of the two lower models over n. So if this happens, then your reflection system, in a way, doesn't have too much or too essential branching. If you branch, you're always able to gather together what happens. This happens in many situations, but this doesn't always happen. On the other hand, you have compactness. Well, compactness of a theory is every small subset, or for instance, every finite subset, has, if every small subset of T has a model, then T also has a model. In many senses, this is a weak form of finiteness. This is a very general form of finiteness, and many mathematicians outside of logic and topology and so on treat compactness as generalized finiteness. So if amalgamation and compactness are shown to be the same for an abstract logic, this in a way tells us that essential branching, that is the failure, the negation of amalgamation, can be regarded as an essential form of infinity. Because compactness is finiteness in a certain way, and it is amalgamation, so branching is infinity. Well, if this is true, that would be an extremely bare bones form of infinity.